Hello, hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to tune in with us. This is obviously an interesting day and an interesting time, and therefore a really beautiful time to have this type of conversation. So I'm super excited to jump in and to be bare with you all about where we are and what's going on in the world and how we're showing up. So and how we're taking care of ourselves. So DINNA ALEXANYAN, marriage family therapist, and my sister friend. It is a joy to have you back and to wrap up this third installment of tools for transmutation. And as we are experiencing a rather tumultuous, traumatic time, it seems really appropriate to be in conversation with you. So thank
Thank
you.
you, Jen. And yes, this is definitely, I want to just, if I may, to the
Mhm.
audience, say that we were talking a little bit before we came on live, and we just decided that we're going to be completely transparent with you guys, and the way that this was supposed to be today, the third one was supposed to be very like, okay, and then after we do this process, look at this, and you can do it, and you're totally in control, and you can manifest anything. And it's we got to be real. Like it's super hard to be in that space, and that is part of the process as well. You're not always going to be able to be in that space, and this is a highly charged, highly emotional time, and we want to be, we can't, well, we don't even want to be, we just can't ignore it. So that is going to be part of the conversation today regardless. There's no way out of that.
And I just want to send love to, I have a lot of friends who are physically putting their bodies out there, and there's so much going on right now that I tend to be the one in the family that's like, I remain hopeful. And I do very much so remain very hopeful. I think that, as we were talking about earlier, alchemy is not always a comfy process, that, the process of taking sand and making steel or whatever is a whole, or glass or whatever is a whole process that requires heat and time and what would seem like a lot of trauma. And so I think that uh, oh man, my heart is breaking and at the same time is healing. And so I just feel this really sense of openness and availability to what's going to come in this conversation, but also what's going to come in this time. And it reminds me that it may be hard to see, but now is the time that we really must see. We really must imagine our next life, like collectively, like we really must think about what comes on the other side of this apocalypse, what comes on the other side of revelations. Like, I think that actually more now than ever, this type of conversation at an individualized level, who are you when this healing has happened?
Mm.
Who do you want to be? How do you stand in that? Like maybe this conversation right now, DINNA, is that much more important, even from the selfish perspective.
Absolutely, of course it's super important,
Mm,
and the thing is that of course if you're is somehow able to, like, in some zen, completely self-actualized way, pull yourself from an
yeah,
individualistic perspective and see things from this ego point of view, then you do realize you're able to see things as like, oh, it's all happening this way and for a reason, and all those kind of beautiful things that empower you and raise your vibration so that lower vibrating things cannot come into your life.
right.
And this is very much like what we were talking about in the very beginning about getting stuck into these certain chakras. When we individuate, it's very much scarier,
Mm,
because then it's like, me, this is going to maybe hurt me, or this is maybe going to hurt this person right next to me that
mm,
I
mm,
love.
mm, mm,
But
mm.
and you aren't able to elevate over. And on top of it, and this kind of ties into, I think that sometimes the idea of elevating above almost makes you feel like you're not
Oh,
letting the world know that this isn't okay. So
yeah.
if you're just like, like in some kind of self-actualized Zen space, it's as if you're giving a message that it's okay what you're doing.
Right.
And I think that sometimes we get down in there because, and thank God for those people too, because they gotta, like you said, for the people who are putting themselves out there and like on the front lines, they have to be in that place. They have to be in their body in that place. So
But that's also a calling. Like, I think, one of the things that I've learned with my years of, being an activist and an organizer is that you have to do what calls to you to do,
right.
And so, cheers.
Mine's water, but I'll take some of what you got. I'll take some of what you
Mine
got.
is sangria because it's been that kind of day. Um, damn it, I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Okay. Well, what I want to talk today about for sure is, as we look at this timeline that was our homework, was to look at the timeline of our lives. So from 0 to our age now and then forward another 10 years is what DINNA asked us to do, is write down the timeline of the experiences in our life. And it's really interesting to have done that, right? And to look at the experiences of my life and to be able to look and kind of have that bird's eye view and say, everything that has happened has actually really been for my good.
Right.
There hasn't been anything that was a tragedy that wasn't then met with a brilliant open door.
Mm.
And so it's really intense because I sit here in this present moment now with this level of challenge. Like, this is some wholly other shit, you know what I mean? Because you cannot escape the reality that Blackness is killing people. Or better yet, I'm sorry, that whiteness is killing people. Like, you can't escape that reality right now. Like, my uncle died during this time from COVID.
Mm.
Ultimately, because he was an elderly Black man who didn't have someone to advocate for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm looking at Black people that are being murdered in this time, and it's hard for me as I stand when I stand in the now, in the spiritual now, when I use my spiritual practice, I'm calm enough to appreciate that these things are happening and it's not who I am. They're experiences and they're outside of me, certainly. But it's very hard as I stand here and I look in the now and go, what am I going to get from this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does this fit in my timeline? And how am I supposed to reconcile in this moment as we're talking about trauma, as the trauma is coming in? How am I supposed to reconcile that? You know?
So it's interesting because it kind of again brings back to like for the people, and I really encourage you to go back and watch these in order. But the first time we met, we talked about the chakras, the meridian points, the energy points, and the age group of trauma that happens depending on which chakra, and how you really have to like work through from the bottom up, right?
Yeah.
But when you think about those, we also talked about like when you're in the lowest vibration of them and when you're in the highest. And what you just described is exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the lowest, you're just paralyzed by the fear, right? So as an evolved individual, like, I can't go there too much because if I do, I'll just become paralyzed.
Right.
So, but I don't want to go way up here and be completely ignorant or like live in some kind of fantasy world and not actually be watching my back either. Like be careful, you know? So we talked about that. And then we talked about how trauma affects the adrenals, the cortisol levels, all the different hormones and chemicals in your brain and all these things. And then we talked about how to have a routine and a self-care routine and why that's important for you to try to get your adrenals back, right?
Mm.
And then last week, the homework for today was to do an entire timeline. And the reason I wanted to do that with you guys is because there is a lot of research done on what happens to people when they pass away and then they die and then they were brought back to life, right? And they all say the same thing, but it is not that life flashes before your eyes. It actually is that life flashes in a hindsight way. So from present moment backwards all the way, if you really stay dead long enough before they bring you back, all the way back to the womb. And what every single person says is, oh my God, everything fucking made sense. this happened so that this could happen. So like a real quintessential example is like I was watching something the other day where a woman got hit by a motorcycle. I mean, on a motorcycle, and her leg and arm got ripped out.
Mm.
So
Mm.
she now does not have one leg and one arm. And but in getting to the hospital in the emergency room, she saw this woman, and she had like this like light around her. And anyway, that woman ended up becoming her partner
Mm.
and saved her life. It was like a nurse there or something.
Wow.
Saved her life. So that would be like a sort of an example of like this horrific thing, but then it brings you to over to this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted you guys to do for today was to tape the line all the way so it becomes linear. And instead of looking at it from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 years old to the present, I wanted you guys to turn around and look at it backwards. And we don't do this together today. I just want you guys to really look at it on your own time and start to see if there's patterns, if there's things that have happened, and if there were some openings of positivity that happened from things that felt really fucked up at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And things that you were like, I will never survive this. Things in my life that I felt like I would never survive have immediately transformed into how I help other people with those
Mm-hmm.
things. I can't really understand that if I haven't experienced it myself. I can try to empathize, but I really, really can't understand.
So do you feel like that's part of the opportunity of the tragedy of this moment? Is that if you, like, for me, what I get from what you just said is that if you're looking at the process of your life, if you can look at in the moments where there was extreme tragedy, it defined the type of person that you were going to be and the way that you were going to show up in the world. And so, like, right now, this is an opportunity for us to be present to how we may be of service.
I mean, it really depends on the human being,
Yeah.
I couldn't say that like as a blanket for everybody, blanket statement, but yeah, for sure. Like this is hard, Jen, because I'm very much received as a white person. I'm not received as a Black person in this society. It's not like I even have that experience to be received in a different way. I may not be received always white, but like, you know what I mean? So I can't say what that experience or why this is happening for each individual person. I can say that to try to like bring this into some type of positivity or joy, which I know that to be honest with the audience, you and I are having a challenging time with that today, is that the what we're hoping to do with this exercise is that you would then turn around and face forward for the future. And you would start to kind of plug in the things that you would want to happen. And that's based on this idea that I'll give you like this anecdote. But to answer your question more so is that if we feel that we are completely out of control when a trauma is happening, the best thing that we can do is try to at least take control of the things that we do have control over, which is what we talked about last week, like the routines and being like, at least I know that I get up and eat at this time. At least I know I do, until you get through the trauma, until you can start to actualize in a different way. And because those lower chakras and those lower vibrations are being triggered right now, we can't really get into that space. We have to actively work on trying to get us into higher vibrations into each chakra. And that's just about consciousness. That's just about being conscious that, oh, I'm fully fucking triggered right now. I'm way in my lower chakra. And I know because when this happens, I usually become paralyzed and I don't even know how to feed myself. Oh, I must be in my root chakra in the lowest vibration. Let me try to like meditate and work on that. And why it's important to try to get into that space. Okay, I feel like I'm totally jumping ahead. So hold on a second.
No, I mean, I think that I think that you're on the right path. And what I was looking to ask right now is, for those of us in brown skin, I think one of the things that's really hard is that people are like, wow, this must be really hard for you, as opposed to this is really hard, right? And so like it has to be as hard for you as it is for me because we're all human together here. And so the I think that what I'm looking for right now is in the sense that we manifest what it is that we want to see in this world. So if we can look at our timeline and we can look at what has happened for us and we can establish the understanding that there's an opportunity here,
Hmm.
I think that that's what I guess maybe I'm just longing for. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I think that you're talking about manifesting and creating and visualizing, which you and I have talked a lot about, but we haven't touched on that with this audience. So
yeah.
maybe I should go back and kind of work through into that space. But yes, and correct me if I'm not tying it in together, but there's this kind of concept, right? So this is in no way, I'm going to give like a little story, but there's in no way I'm saying that I believe this or that everybody should believe this. But let's say
Mhm.
when we die,
Mhm.
that our ego leaves us completely and we become this sort of part of everything spirit, right? And in this place, wherever we are, that we're hanging out, we're this everyday spirit that feels no suffering, no pain, no nothing, is all knowing because we are like become one with our higher self, right? So we're hanging out in this chilling space, totally chill. And we're watching all the drama down below because we're supposedly up in like a space, right? So we're watching all this drama down below, and we're not affected by it in the same way. We're like, I'd be like, oh, Jen, you'll be fine, because I don't feel or understand suffering as much anymore, and because I understand that everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. So
Mhm.
one day, your little spirit decides that it wants to go back. It
Mm.
wants to go back into a body and is like, yeah, I'm kind of like bored. I mean, I don't know if an egoless spirit would feel bored, but I'm kind of bored. I want to feel suffering again. I want to feel ups and downs. I've done it for a while. Like I'm down to go back.
Definite body so I can traumatize myself.
Yeah, like I don't remember that it was bad because you don't know, right? You
Right.
don't feel badness. So okay. So you're sitting there and you're like, I want to go back. And the creator of all that is like, are you sure? And you're like, yep, 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 yep. I'm excited. I want to go back. The creator's like, okay, what virtues do you want to learn in this lifetime? What do you want to learn? And you're like, I want to learn forgiveness, right? And then this other little soul next to you is like, oh yeah, I want to go back too. I want to go back too. And I'm gonna be your best friend for 17 years, and then I'm gonna stab you in the back so that you can learn forgiveness. And you guys are like, yeah, and high five each other. You're
Mm.
like, that sounds so fun. And the creator of all of this, which is really you as well, is like, this is your life, curate it. But because you don't remember or don't feel suffering or don't see suffering as bad, you see it as an alchemy. You
Mm.
see it as like, girl, you just got to work through that and you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Like, you just have to believe you're going to be okay, right? So you go back, and this is where we see this narrative line. And if we were under this concept, if we just believed this, right, just for a second, then that would mean that in every sense of the word, you have curated your life. Now, some people would probably want to stab me in the neck for this because they'd be like, why would I fucking curate getting choked out? Why would I curate being raped? Why would I choose those things?
Great
And
violence. Yeah.
and I understand. And I employ people to really look at like the eagle eye view of it. Because if you realize that you are the curator, then
Mhm.
when you turn around and look this way forward,
Mhm.
you get to fucking decide what you want.
Mhm.
That's why I have you guys do the timeline, stop at your age, and then put like another 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it might be, because maybe I'm 45. Maybe I don't know exactly where I'm going to be at 50, but maybe I know that at 60, I want to become a midwife.
Mm.
Or I want to learn about herbs or something. I want to just like take off and learn about herbs. So I would put that down there. Okay. And this is where I'm connecting it to visualization and manifestation.
Mhm.
Okay. Because the idea behind visualizing and manifesting things, which I won't go in like huge detail about because everybody in this audience is going to get access to a whole bunch of written format around it. And the idea is that the more that you visualize something, and because we are all energy, we are just energy, right? If I visualize something and I visualize it in great detail and I visualize the emotion that it's going to make me feel, And I don't engage in all the other worries and anxiety. Well, how the fuck would that happen? Or how did that? I just stay here. Then when I walk out in the world that day, that's the vibration that I'm in. And energetically, literally nothing else can enter it. It may be happening, and I know you have that friend, yo, that walks down the street and shit falls, but it just misses her. And all she saw was like where she was going, right? So there's this kid's book called Harold and the Purple Crayon,
Mhm.
where Harold is this little kid that's like, I'm gonna walk down the street, and he has a purple crayon, and he draws the street, and he walks down, and he's like, I'm hungry, I want an apple, and he draws a tree and takes an apple, and this is sort of this process that is way more detailed that Auntie J is also going to talk about, is also going to be in the written stuff. But I just wanted to get the audience to start to get like a little taste of this, because once you engage into that, it is extremely powerful. So just a last little anecdote story. When I lived in Brooklyn, I used to go to this one bodega every day and get these candles. And eventually the guy was like, what do you do with these candles? There was a whole bunch of people in the bodega. They were like, yeah, all of them were like, yeah, girl, what do you do with these candles? And I was like, I light them on certain days, whatever, but I light them and I visualize what I want to happen for that day. And he was like, well, what if it doesn't happen? And I was like, it actually doesn't matter, because if I visualize it,
It happened.
I know that it makes me happy. When I get happy, it releases dopamine. That makes me even more happy. So I'm visualizing, I get excited. So that when I open my eyes and walk out on the street, it actually really doesn't matter if that thing happened or not, because I'm already, all I want to do is be in joy. So I'm
Right.
already happy. So I'm walking down the street as if it happened.
Yeah.
It's the emotion that we want, you know?
I
Sorry,
think
I'm excited.
no. Well, I think that as I tie it into what's happening right now and the power of visualization now, right? The power of looking at our timeline as a living being and then putting it in the context of what's happening right now is that we get to look at the past, look at what has happened in our lives, see the pivots that have happened as a result of the perceived traumas. And we get the opportunity to see that ultimately the divine is still working for our good. And then, even in this moment, I think that the challenge is uh, it's either fuck it if it's delusional, right? Like I think that that's the that's the
Exactly.
opportunity right now. It's like fuck it if it's delusional. Like it's better for the chemicals in your brain and the healing of your brain to just fantasize the world that you want to live in. And I think that it's a privileged perspective and a privileged space to be able to say we just imagine these things and so forth, right? Like I know that my talent, literally the fact that I can sing has allowed me to experience and be in different places such that I can collect such a diversity of friends that would offer me some ideas that would allow me to imagine something else that is possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still think that it's incumbent upon me to leverage those tools, but I think that the opportunity right now that I want to offer everybody before we depart is that we have to be willing to imagine, even if it's painfully irrational, perceived as irrational
Yeah.
right now, because if nothing else, we're releasing some serotonin in our adrenal burnout, cortisol burnt out, fucked up,
No, that's super real though, Jen, because we like literally people are gonna die just from trauma. Like not actually physically being killed by somebody. If that's not gonna kill them, it's gonna be from seeing these images over and over again, or understanding the reality of what's going on. And there is nothing wrong with self-care. There is nothing wrong with going into your room and closing your eyes and watching something beautiful behind your mind, you know, like no matter if you can find peace within your own mind,
Yeah.
then you can control anything. And if we collectively come together and understand that, and this is like, let me just ask you a question,
Hmm.
okay? It's 2020, COVID's happened, and now all this shit is going down as well, right? Now, close your eyes for a minute, and it's 2022. It's 2 years from now. How would you talk about this time?
Mm.
You don't have to like do a whole paragraph. Just
Yeah.
like how was that time two
It
years
was
ago?
it was really hard. It was challenging. It was inspiring though because I connected with other people that really dared to dream something better, and I'll be goddamn, we created something better.
And in your fantasy now, what would you say happened? Like literally because this fucked up shit went down and somebody's life was taken and this other person's life was taken and this is what and then there was a revolt and there were these protests and lockdown upon lockdown and then what happened in your fantasy?
And then the uh, people got more civically engaged, and not just on the federal level or on the global level, but on the local level. People started to understand that the things that were happening in their life was really connected to their local governments, to the businesses that were able to thrive right where they were, and therefore the way that they were able to feed their families and the nutrition, and therefore the way that their families were able to think and so forth. And so people got more civically engaged, and they realized that they needed to vote with their values, not with just the idea of who could possibly win. And so we got a new administration that reflected um, more values that saw space for everybody in them. Yeah. And so culture shifted. Like this was the beauty of this time, in 2020, was that culture shifted. People decided that they could see that what was happening to Black and brown people was happening to them. People made it personal. That's when people decided that they really began to know what it meant to be American and to be a global citizen.
That's the only thing that you could really do because we're not in control of a lot of things, you know. In that process of your fantasy, in that process there were a lot of people who became paralyzed with fear. There were a lot of people who became very traumatized. There were a lot of people who lost their lives. There were a lot of horrible, horrible things that happened, and they were not in vain. If there's some shift, you know, so that's the kind of the best that we can do right now.
But that's so powerful. Like if we know that the human mind creates what it imagines, right? Then like I imagine a world where all living beings have what they need to thrive. Genuinely, you know?
And does that make you feel good, right? I mean, that's the thing is that how is it going to make any sense to make yourself feel worse? Like if you feel good,
Yeah.
then you can walk out into the world. Stop.
But I think the hard part is, and this is where having a discipline counts, right? Like having the practice of meditation, mantra, movement, and medicine really, really matters because
Absolutely, because otherwise you're going to drown into that lower chakra, lower vibration. Like all of what we've talked about ties over and over and over again with itself.
yeah,
And listen, sometimes like today for us, like you're not always going to be able to be like in that higher space, and that's okay too,
yeah,
you know. It's I think that where it becomes extremely dangerous is if it paralyzes you.
Yeah.
because then you're in full PTSD.
Well, and if it also limits your imagination, like I think that the most dangerous thing about oppression is that it kills the imagination, right? So it makes you only think the oppressed and the oppressor as the positions that are possible, as opposed to imagining a world where everyone is healed and appreciates that the oppressor is the most acutely ill. Um, and and so it's like, I think that's the thing, is that in these times, it's really important for white people to talk to each other, because the way that oppression works, the psychosis of oppression is that it makes you only able to see those two positions, right? And so over time and soon enough, some well-educated Asian man or something is going to be like, white people are the cancer to the world. And there will be enough perceived experience where then there'll be a shift, and over the next several hundred years it'll be all about, and that's exactly what we don't want. What we don't want is a world where what we're imagining constantly is the feedback loop of oppression. Like, I don't, and that's why I have a problem with the word justice sometimes. Like, I don't need for white people to experience what black people experience. I need for the experience of oppression to stop. And I can't create the oppression, I can't create the experience of oppression stopping if I'm constantly thinking about the fight of oppression, right? But if I'm imagining a world where all living actively, imagining a world where all living beings have what they need to thrive. So it's not that I'm imagining the end of a police force, I'm imagining a world where all living beings have what they need to thrive. Then, right, I can help to bring that about. But if what I'm focused on is the pain and the trauma, then, you know, we'll be having technological abolitionist movements of the butts and such for white people in another 150 years.
The ability to survive is trauma is based solely on the imagination, is the ability to imagine. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like if you read about any revolutionary political individual, they always had very lofty visions, you know. Yeah. You have to be able to have that. And even great writers who talk about being children and being in horrible situations and letting their imagination sort of create another world for them.
Yeah.
It's probably the healthiest coping mechanism we can have. But once if we kill that, which it can be killed with that fear, just constant fear, because that's all that's racing through your brain. It just pushes you lower and lower and lower and lower and lower.
This is why having an imagination right now is a revolutionary act, even, right? Like, yeah. And, you know, I think it's something that all of us can do, right? So it's not just those of us who are in this particular skin that are having, you know, a particular experience, but that all of us can employ this, as Auntie Jay says, you know, give the angels some jobs, you know, go and give your angels some jobs and help them to imagine a world where we get to benefit from one another, you know, and from that space that we dismantle this concept of blackness or whiteness.
You know, and as woo-woo as it seems, like the whole you know, group meditation, group visualization is extremely powerful.
Yeah, that's the next step. We're gonna have to have an online meditation of a world where people are thriving. Yeah. Well, I'm so thankful and I'm so grateful that we've had this opportunity. I know that we deviated a little bit. We didn't even engage anybody in the thread to talk to us. I'm so sorry. We didn't even ask you to ask us any questions this time. These are unique times. And so we're thankful that you were here in this conversation. And DINNA is a part of the Fun Manifesto through and through. So if you have any questions for Miss DINNA, you can go to thefunmanifesto.com and you can hit up Miss DINNA ALEXANYAN, and ask questions. And we are in the process of creating something really beautiful, me, DINNA, and Miss Auntie J, that we look forward to sharing with you guys. And so this is definitely not the end of this conversation, just the wrap up of this particular part of the series.
If I could, I just wanted to end to say that, like, if you, if the audience, like, if you guys take anything away in terms of like the visualization manifestation, of course there's so much detail to that, and it'll be in all the writings that we put out and everything, but um literally stating intention
Mm.
out loud is very powerful. You know, I've had little evil fantasies where I'm like, instead of active protest, what if everybody sat down and started to like state, you know, not, I had not such kind thoughts, you know, like state intentions, and felt like that would pretty, like, really fuck with somebody's head pretty bad if you had like thousands of people cursing you, basically. Just but the actual physical act of verbally out loud stating intentions. I do it in every room of my house, but I do it every morning when I meditate. What it is that I want to feel, that I want to do, that I want to see. You have
Mhm.
to just put it out there, because once you hear it back too, there's
Yes,
something extremely powerful in that.
yes,
Writing it down in pen where you can't erase it, like,
yes,
these are powerful things. And why I asked you, Jen, when you visualize your fantasy, how does it make you feel? And you were like, it makes me feel good. That's extremely important, because when you feel joy,
yeah,
you will then walk out into the world and exude it out and only receive it back. So
yeah,
that's super, super important. We need to raise our vibration.
yeah. Well, that's our homework then, is this, as we release you into the cosmos. Auntie J is on Wednesday as we wrap up this series with her. Let us imagine a world where all living beings have what they need to thrive. Imagine it. What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? What kind of food are you cooking? How much time are you spending at home? Who are you making love to? Like,
Mm.
what is it all? How, where are you? How frequently do you travel? Like, what does it really feel like and look like to have the world where all living beings have what they need to thrive?
Zero lack.
Zero lack. There's
Mm.
absolutely,
Enough for everybody.
absolutely enough for everyone. Because that's the truth of the world, is that we do have everything that we need. So, like, if we actually used what we have here, what would we create? And how does that, you know, do it from that space, that warm space. Say it out loud from that warm space. It is so beautiful to look out my window and see beautiful Black men running around the neighborhood, staying fit and being healthy and being happy and enjoying being fathers and husbands and part of their community. It is so beautiful. It is so amazing to see people of all ethnicities enjoying one another's foods and medicines and offering each other, new holidays to celebrate with each other and new ways of calling on God.
That's amazing what you just did, because you didn't use any no this or no that,
No,
because the energy out there only hears the word. So if you say like walking around with no fear, it
yeah,
really only hears fear.
right.
So to try to just state the positives, you know.
Yeah, just say what we want,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and if nothing else, you're fucking delusional. So
Not hurting anybody.
you're winning, you're not hurting anybody. It's fine.
Hmm. And your cortisol's probably hella low. Your blood pressure's like chilling.
Your serotonin was like, hey, hey, hey.
You're just walking. You know those people. I have friends like that where I'm like, amazing.
Like, bitch, how much your
Nothing phases you. Yeah. Like,
thank you, DINNA. Thank you so much. And
Thank you,
I
Jen.
love you guys all out there, and please take extra good care of yourself. You matter. You matter. You matter. You matter. And you're an important, integral part of creating a world where all living beings are aware that we have all that we need to thrive. Whatever your little magic is, whatever it is that you do in this world that your heart is being called to do, that shit is hell of important. And like, we need you to do that. You are my personal answered prayer. So I give thanks that you have the balls to do it. I'll show you, Amen.
Thank you, Jen. I love you.
I love you too.